coming through, I was just going to hold this side of this thing up. You just hold the room side up. I have a Glock that my son gave me. And it hadn't been shot. But I'm going to shoot it from this. One of these things.
His wife's granddaddy lived in Tucson. For some reason, the old man took a liking to him. When the old man died, he left his pistol collection. His wife didn't want him in the house. She was going to get rid of him. You better not. Daddy will get rid of you. I had to talk to the chief of police. Go ahead and find something like that. In Tucson, they had to collector's license. Brand new. Luger Mark 3, 22 dollars. A Smith Wesson 40 caliber. And one of these old Colt Alger-Sullivan rescues. I got to reglue it. It's in bad shape.
Well, redo them and get them in good shape. It ain't near as much trouble trying to keep them in good shape. It's 50 learning being in bad shape.
This is model 11 automatic with 2 barrels on that.
I'm going to tell you about that. Model 11. How long you had it?
Since Gene Bird died.
Are we ready to get started? No, sit down. Thank goodness, Tom, I had somebody out of the way.
How you do?
I was in it.
Don, they made a comment up here about you. Miss Katie said he'll sit down, but he won't shut up.
That's true.
If y'all would, we'll go ahead and get started. David, would you open us with a word of prayer, please?
Father, we thank you for the day, your blessings in it, and each one who's here. Pray that you bring joy to the hearts of each one from the fellowship we receive. Help us, Father, in our efforts to walk worthy of your name. I ask in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Would y'all stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Janine, where you at? Do we have any?
Any what?
Minute?
Well, I think we're going to go.
Okay.
Okay. The monthly meeting of the Alger-Sullivan Historical Society met on June the 18th, 2013 at the Leach House. The meeting was called to order by our president, Jerry Fisher. Margaret Collier led in prayer, and the pledge to the flag was given. The minutes were read by Janine Johnson and approved as read. Jerry reported that he had contacted the REA about us having a follow car for the next sawmill day. They said it should not be a problem. Jerry gave a tribute to John Kimbrough. He was well known and liked by many and did good work and helped many in the area when they had a problem that needed to be fixed. Jerry suggested we place a brick in his memory. The hat was passed and a collection taken for the brick. Jerry reminded us of the Collector's Day coming up in August. We will have a gospel singing on that day. If we know of anyone who would like to participate, give Jerry their name and phone number. Jerry contacted Tom Nichols to be part of the Collector's Day. Don Sales will get in touch with Harvey Kelly to serve shaved ice on that day. And that's shaved ice, I'm sorry, I was corrected. Jerry then introduced our speaker, Mr. Rhett Johnson. Mr. Johnson gave a very informative talk on the longleaf pine trees. He had been involved with the pines all his life. He grew up in South Carolina where they grew abundantly. After the speaker finished, we adjourned the meeting and refreshments were enjoyed by all. There were 27 members, 3 guests, and the speaker present. Submitted by Janine Johnson, Secretary. Any changes?
Yeah, corrections to the minutes. If not, Janine, we'll let them stand if they're in.
Thank you.
Ann Brooks is not here. I don't believe I've seen her. We still got lights in the building. We still got water, so I guess we got enough time to get by for 1 more month. It's good to see all of y'all here, but it's even nicer to see some strange teenagers we have in this building. Joyce, you want up too.
Thank you.
We call it a teenager anybody under around 60 and around. Good to see a Callaway. Breath of fresh air. Good to see old popping off Pam over there. We'll find something for her to do, I'm sure. And did I miss any stranger in place?
Yeah, Ron, he hadn't been here for, this is 2 meetings, so we better recognize him.
You get a paddle for that, though.
Don says just let it go. Let me run over 3 or 4 real quick things with you here so you'll know a little bit about what's going on. First of all, I want to get rid of this bucket here. Y'all see that? That's a Cool Whip, and it's 12 ounces. We need a bunch of those filled up with water, frozen, and bring it to our collector's day. Because Harvey Kelly's been good enough to loan us his ice machine, and Donald is going to need these cups frozen. You can take it out of this bucket and bring it to Donald on collector's day, or bring it and put it in the freezer over there. But the more we got, the better off we will be. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I believe Don mentioned that we could freeze it, turn it out, several of them. In other words, freeze it more than one time, turn them out as they got frozen, put them in a bag, pop them into the freezer, and then bring them to
You
collector's
say
day.
ice is
Put them in individual bags,
There you go.
Yes.
so they won't freeze together.
Yes, ma'am. This size will fit perfect in the machine. So,
Any smaller and any bigger won't work.
won't do it. It has to be.
That's a very good machine.
This is 12 ounces. Okay.
I got it.
Just remember it's a Cool Whip. And so, if you would, help us out.
He said butter tub too, as long as it's 12 ounces. That's
Yeah,
fine.
as long as it's 12 ounces, it's okay. But it's got to fit in the machine.
We need 75, to 100 that day.
Yeah. It's going to be hot. It's going to be August the 10th. And we need every one of y'all here. Okay? And can you help me out on this?
We'll do our best.
Okay?
I would buy a lot of Cool Whip.
And this is one of our little money-making projects. Okay? And while we own getting you to donate something, we're getting the same people that's participating in our meal afterwards. So if you would, we would appreciate you signing up with Miss Jewel wherever she's at and help us out there. Usually there's 2 or 3 that bring stuff each meeting. And to be honest with you, I look forward to it. It's a good time had by all. We all enjoy it. I enjoy these daggone meetings. The only meeting I go to where I can be happy all the time. I was on the city council for 26 years here in Century, and I dreaded it. I just knew that's the place you go where people can look you in the face and say, you ain't worth a flip. And all you do is
Or something similar to that.
Some of the things I read in the paper, you might ought to go on.
Right. But it's a lot of fun being here, and I hope you enjoy it as much as we do. I love to see people like old popping off Pam. Look at that smile on that face back there. She's always got it on. Need more Bob the swimming pool.
Your face got better.
Okay, enough of that. Participate if you would. This is a sheet right here, and it's getting close to November. That's this, December and January. We all participate in that. So get with Jewel Warren and sign up if you would on something. Okay, real quick, like we didn't have time before y'all all got here to discuss. Next year, our Sawmill Day, I have called REA and asked them about using their trolley car. Now, she looks like that she's going to be able to help us with this, but now they'll furnish a driver. It won't cost us anything if they participate. She seems to think that REA will. So we got that going. Harvey Kelly's going to furnish Donald with the ice machine for our Collector's Day. And we're going to be selling ice snow cones, you'd call it. The roof of the gazebo is going on fine and dandy. When the Lions Club comes by and they ask you to buy a broom or a mop, buy a broom or a mop.
And we got some in here.
Yeah, and that don't necessarily mean that you got to use it. Just buy it.
That was a close thing.
I begged them and begged them to bring me one last year, and they told me to go somewhere or another. I did think I got it. I bought some. I bought them.
And we're working on the box car out here. Hopefully, with dry weather, we'll have that portion of it completed fairly shortly. The caboose. The caboose, yes. Box car, caboose, whatever. Okay, now I have thrown out a few odd end things there. Neil, did you leave? Where are you at? Okay, I just want to be sure you was here. A month or so ago, and I think it was you, Miss Chantry, wanted a medium.
Okay, I still got the small one at the house.
Okay, do you still want the
I
medium?
still want the medium.
Okay, what you going to trade with us?
If I like it.
Okay. If you don't like it, just beat the devil out of David Green. He needs a good whooping.
What everybody else says.
But anyway, I found that one at the house. I was saving it for Larry Walker, but I told Larry I done got rid of it.
Tell him who you give it to here.
He's bigger than you now.
Yeah, but he
But he's a gentleman.
Yeah, he's a gentleman. Okay, real quick. Yes, sir.
Well, tell us about Jerry Simmons. Is he recuperating?
Yeah, Jerry is recuperating. He must have felt bad. I sort of was looking for him here tonight. But, you know, he had his knee replaced, and he's out of rehab. He's home. But he's going back and forth to Jay to rehab Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But really, overall, he's ahead of his schedule according to what the doctors say. So he'll be right back probably next month, and he'll have one of them popping off pound smiles on his face. And when he gets straightened out, Joe, I want you and him to have a foot race, and I want you to show.
Oh, yeah, I can't run. I can't run.
Okay, now I have explained to y'all the different things going on. Does anybody have a question? Does anybody have anything they want to bring up tonight? Helen, I have never seen you just sit there and not say one word. I must have been good tonight.
Well, if I say very much, I can get up there and jump on you, and you ain't in no tree.
Do it, do it!
There's truth, so I ain't got much to say.
Good.
You gonna sit there and be nice.
Okay. Good to have the pistols back. And certainly y'all both look good, but I believe one of you look a lot better than the other. Neil, are you ready?
I don't know.
Our guest
Never tried
speaker.
this.
Now, next month, our guest speaker will be the college professor. Neil, I didn't hold it. I only asked Neil. Brian Rooker. So, y'all be here July, August the 20th. Will be Brian Rooker.
that the gentleman that's starting for DJC?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
And he is an entertainer too.
He's right behind you.
We had a great speaker last month, and we got a great speaker here tonight. It's always good to have some. Oh, yes.
Here, I'll lift you up so you can.
Oh,
Hold on, let's get us some chairs.
Gary called me Friday and said, you know you're the guest speaker.
He said, now I do.
So I've got to do a little scrambling.
no, it's always good, Neil. Now, you know, we have a lot of people that know a lot of things about history. And so it's good. If you would like to be a guest speaker some night, some meeting, give me a call and we'll schedule you in there.
How about telling community gossip stories?
He knows all that.
Yeah.
No, he don't. I was here before he was.
We like to hear them. Neil, you tell me when you've been turned off the light.
If we could, turn off the lights at that end so I can see what I'm doing. I don't have a remote control, so I've got to be fairly little.
No.
It's just the opposite of that.
Yeah, just the opposite.
Just turn all of them off up there and I'll turn these on.
All right, you got a
here.
fan?
That little
Make
round,
it work.
that little switch by the round thing, turn it, there you go.
How's that?
Well, if the computer and the machine decide to get along together, we'll be fine. This actually worked the other
Say
day.
they're not talking to each other.
I still like 35 minutes.
Pam said turn the fan off.
No, that's all right.
Is it too strong?
Yeah, Pam said you moved. We have hot flashes.
That gum Simpsons down there, they so far back out in the woods, they don't know what fans are. I heard Renee say a while ago, look, Tony, it works.
Well, this thing is doing. Okay, here we go. Let me see. I may have to get a little closer. We got two.
You want a book to put under the back end of there?
How he's just trying to get all the picture on them.
Why don't you move?
Yeah, let's see.
Move up just a little bit.
I think it's somebody that's flying over.
Sit right here, Renee. Sit right here.
Oh,
I got another chair. Okay. You can have it. Is that good enough? That's not enough, you got another.
Launch from a catapult. Snap picture on the way that.
Google car came through my head.
Say again.
The Google car came through my head.
I waited there at it when I passed it. That's fine. Now we really.
Well, that's close.
I call it the Google Mobile.
That's good, yeah.
All right. That's, as you may infer from that, that's what Century looked like in 1940. But we're going to go back before that. We're going to go back to the founders of Alger-Sullivan Lumber Company.
Want this light out now?
I just need to be able to see what I'm doing here. I need some light in here.
Do you know who stopped this for?
That's a government photo.
Oh, you can't tell.
Yeah. Okay. Now some of these founders we have some information on, a lot, and some we don't have a lot, and some we have it's just wrong. So we're going to see if we can straighten some of that out. I have actually found some interesting stuff the last few days. We knew about General Alger, and we knew about Martin Sullivan, and that's how we get the name Alger-Sullivan. Well, probably not many of us have heard of John Millen, but he was one of the incorporating founders. Then there's Colonel Hecker. We know about Colonel Hecker. And Edward A. House, who basically ran the town. And last but not least, my favorite character, which is Colonel William Mann. Now let's start off with Martin Sullivan. Martin and his brother Dan were Yankee soldiers when they first saw this area, and surviving the war between the states, they decided they were going to take advantage of some of the wonderful prospects that they noted when they were here in their military service. So they came back, they went home and raised a bunch of money and came back, bought some land and got in the lumber business. It was the fashionable thing to do back then. A lot of people were doing it. And they did a good job of it with Southern States Lumber Company. They had mills at Pine Barren, Molino, and who knows wherever they had all these places. He was a soldier to begin with, a landholder, a lumberman. He became a banker and a philanthropist. He, let's see where I am. He started a bank. It's, you know you're rich when you can print your own money. Now, this is the bank he started. It's also the Pensacola Opera House, because Pensacola was kind of a rough place at the time, and that added some culture. Let's back up this shot a little bit. You see it across Plaza Ferdinand there in downtown Pensacola. See how people were back then. Men wore suits, had their straw hats or their bowlers, and the ladies had their nice long dresses. Now that baby over there on the park bench on the right has no shoes on. And baby better get shoes on, and I'll show you why. Because Granny just took a dip. That's so cute.
Wow, it's a different view today.
Yeah. Now it'd be, if you go there, it'd be you and the homeless guys.
Yep.
Now, I want you to understand the magnitude of the lumber business in Pensacola in the era of, say, 1880 to 1920. Give or take a little bit, you would have dozens of ships at any given time in the harbor waiting to load up. Now, what you see in the foreground is not dock. That's rafts of logs, square-cut timbers, waiting to be loaded. All along the waterfront in Pensacola, there were sawmills and these holding pens for all these rafts. Now, there's a back view of it. You can see that if you get to looking at it, those are not 2x4s. Those are mostly 12x12s and bigger.
To walk across.
Yeah. Now, Jerry, you a while back came across some log chains, log dogs.
Log jobs.
Yeah, let me show you how they got used. That's how they stuck those timbers together and floated them as rafts. Now, a lot of richer folks that I have known don't really much use their own money on projects. They convince other people to provide the money. And Alger-Sullivan was no exception to that. In 1911, they issued some bonds because Mr. Alger had bought some land up in Conecuh and Monroe County that he was going to sell the company. So they issued these bonds, and I love the artwork on there because that shows it the way it was back there in the logging business. These were 3% bonds, and I'm guessing they didn't sell very well because later that same year they came out with 5% bonds. Now, in addition to Mr. Sullivan, we had Mr. Alger. Now, why did Sullivan and Alger get together? Alger was in all kinds of lumber businesses and other projects, and Sullivan, he had his banks and his sawmills. And I think that the answer to that question would be in the combined forces. Combined money to put together the largest operation in the country, and Alger had railroad expertise. The vast distances involved here were so great that you couldn't just float them down the river anymore. You had to have some other means of transport. They didn't have log trucks back then. So Alger brought in trains. Now Alger and Sullivan both, none of these guys were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. These were not rich guys. Alger was an orphan at age 12. A pretty good family, but not wealthy. He went to work on his uncle's farm and went to school until he was 19. Then he left the farm. And between 1857 and 1859, he worked to get a law degree. Back in those days, you could get a law degree in 2 years. Well, he joined a law firm, but decided that working cramped up in an office all day was injurious to his health. So he went out to become a logging man, and that was in 1860, and the timing of that kind of sucked, because the war broke out. And he entered the Army as a private. Now, you have heard us in the past refer to him as General Alger. He went from a private in 1861 to a general in 1864. So you got to figure, this guy's got something on the ball.
You know, they shot everybody above him.
Well, they shot him too.
That's what I thought.
They shot him too. So in 1864, he had to resign his commission because he was just kind of messed up. Well, he was not so messed up that after the war, he went back into the lumber business. He formed the R.A. Alger Lumber Company, and then later joined up with Mr. Smith to form the Alger-Smith and Company. And they had little side businesses going on, like the railroads. And he became a financier. Now, I should say that while he was in the military, they had this old boy network that you find, and he had served in the cavalry with several well-known officers, including George Custer. He made a wise decision when he did not continue to be with Custer, as we all know. He got into politics. We got into banking with one of the other cavalrymen there, Mr. Hecker, who we'll talk about in a little bit, and others. In 1884, he was elected governor of the state of Michigan. And there was some talk about him becoming president. Well, that didn't work out. It seems that a very popular lady, somehow or another, ended up in one of his logging towns. And it was at a time when the lumberjacks had some time off, and they came to town and behaved rather badly. And this lady was quite indignant. And in addition to her being indignant, some traveling salesmen, or drummers as they call them, recognized some potential for mischief, and they got her spun up with some tall tales. So she went back to the real world and proclaimed to the newspapers that, for all intents and purposes, Mr. Alger was presiding over Sodom and Gomorrah. So his political aspirations were kind of dashed there.
They figured he'd make a good Secretary of War.
Well, actually, he didn't do very well at that. But in 1890, he was a principal in the formation of the Union Trust Company, which started out rather small, but ended up being a fairly large bank. And one of the things they specialized in that few others did was they gave loans to a working man so he could have a mortgage to buy a house. In 1897, he became the Secretary of War for President McKinley. Some problems arose during the war, probably not his fault, but he was not able to quash the problems. One of the problems I recall was that soldiers were sent tinned meat, and it turned out to be something on the order of rotten horse meat. So they say that an army marches on its stomach, so you have to keep them well fed. They're probably going to as you might expect, by this time, the old boy was doing pretty well by himself. He had a nice house, that's it. Not an apartment in that building, that's his house. Now, there's some confusion existing about another house, the Moorings in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. I'll show you that one as an aerial view. That was his son's house, and his son apparently did pretty well too. He heard about them newfangled airplanes and invested in the Wright Brothers Company and those Packard automobiles. So he was able to do very well and built a nice house. And after his death, the family donated that to the city of Grosse Pointe as a war memorial and a sort of a civic center. It's a very popular spot for weddings. There's the garden at the side of the backyard. You can hardly see the front of the house. It's so covered up with floral things. Well, anyway, this house, I'm not sure if it is the generals or juniors, because people sometimes forget to put the junior. I'm going to assume by the date of 1936 that this is Junior's beach house in York County, Maine, up from where Mom's family hailed.
Complete with ship.
Yeah, they went with a nautical motif, as you might think, with a beach house. Well, this is the living room, and they've got a frigate in the living room. Now, Mom's got a little miniature dinghy in her sun porch, but she didn't have a sailing ship.
So she's a little off too.
So you can get an idea of how big this house must be at the beach. Now, the family had a nice little yacht. I couldn't even begin to estimate how big that sucker is. By steam yacht, my Mom's dad used to drive steam yachts for rich people.
Is that two smokestacks I'm seeing?
Yeah, 2 stacks. I don't think that, that Grandpa Roy ever drove anything like that big. But anyway, Mom helped. Back to Alger's house. It looks like he needs to get the gardener to take care of that ivy problem. Still. By the way, the ink's not dry on this, so kind of winging this. In 1902, Alger was appointed to the Senate. Somebody died, and the governor said, "Here, you handle this." Well, then he got reelected, and then he in turn died after reelection in 1907. So that is the story of Russell Alger, who was a lawyer, a soldier, a lumberman, a banker, a governor, a secretary of war, and a senator. Sounds like a busy man, but he knew how to delegate. He was
Also mayor of Solid, don't forget.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think the name of that town was Saine, Michigan. I'm not sure. Now, John Millen is somebody we have virtually no information on until I got to roaming around. I haven't been able to find a picture.
I think they made him a cruise.
But he was born in 1846. He started out in the lumber business as a boy as a landlooker. Now, that was a new term to me. And I believe that means a timber cruiser, somebody who goes out and evaluates land to see if this is, how much timber you're going to be able to cut out of it. And from there, he rose in the company. You notice the VP general manager of Alger-Smith. So General Alger would start up a company and find a good man to handle it and move on and just collect his paycheck. They had a logging railroad. You remember that the experience and expertise that Alger-Sullivan wanted from Alger was the railroad experience. So over the years they had been railroading, hauling the logs out using railroads. And this Manistee Railroad was built up on the old lumber tracks, the old logging tracks. And it continued for a number of years bringing in freight and
some documents that we have that Mr. Millen was one of two guys who did the timber. We heard of somebody coming through.
Sorry, Neil. Yes, the man and lady, when he was in 69, he lived in the old hotel.
Oh.
And so he didn't know we were having our meeting, but I asked him to come in.
Well, welcome.
Yes.
If you'll come in.
When Alger and Sullivan were doing the ritual of deciding if they were going to hook up together, they did a timber cruise of Sullivan's land, and one of the gentlemen was Mr. Millen. Now, at that time, the cutting standards were you had to be able to make 20-foot sticks with a minimum of 12 inches at the top and no limbs on it. So you had 20 feet, 40 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet, 100 feet even, without any limbs. And they would cut 1, 2, 3, 4 sticks out of that. The reason for that is a lot of the houses had 10-foot ceilings. So you had to have 10-foot studs. Now some had bigger, so they cut different sizes. But because of that standard, they're not cutting anything less than 12 inches diameter at the top of the log. They were really underestimating the amount of timber that they had in inventory. So as the standards changed over the years, they were surprised to find that they kept on having lumber, because the general pattern was that companies would buy some land and they'd go in, build a mill, and cut for a few years, and then they were gone. Well, as a railroad man, in addition to a timber man, he probably helped them get set up with the railroads that Alger-Sullivan would use that ran up until the time after World War II when trucks became plentiful. Our next fella is Frank J. Hecker. Now, is that a power look or what? The photographers, we've got a number of pictures from the photographers of Woodward Avenue in Detroit, and those boys were good. Now, I tried my hand at portraiture, and it just didn't work out. I've been banned in 17 countries because of offensive material. You see what I mean? Oh.
Neil, boy, I owe you. Bradford, wasn't it?
They won't see it again.
Let's see. I don't know how to go back.
You can walk to.
Let's see if we can. There we go. I was doing photography for the auction house, and I always admired, in fact, I did an article on the internet about the photographer's chair. They always used a great chair. And I was photographing that chair when Jerry showed up one day, wanting to know if they had old bottles. So I sat him down, and that's what resulted. And now I'm not allowed to do portraiture anymore.
That's right. Because you can't improve on that.
Let's put it this way, there'll never be another one like that one. But that's a great portrait right there, and really most of the pictures of these well-off guys are very nice. Now, Frank J. Hecker was a man of with many hats too. He started out in War Between the States about the same time as the others. I forget when he was born. He made it to the rank of sergeant during the war, but he went in later during the Spanish-American War as a gray-haired man, and had another go at it. There you are. This time he was colonel, so it paid to go back. He got his commission and his title. Okay. Now, he and General Alger formed the Union Trust, as I said a while ago. He was a principal in the the Detroit Copper and Brass Rolling Mill. There's Mr. Businessman. He was in the Detroit Lumber Company with a fellow named Charles Lane Freer. I don't know if that name means anything to any of you. He was a big art collector. If you go to the Smithsonian, there's a whole wing of art that he collected and donated, and he donated to the building. At that time, it was $1 million just for the building. Well, anyway, these guys were next door neighbors.
Can I
And
ask you a
think
question? Can I ask you a question about the Heckers? Someone said there was a Hecker mansion here somewhere?
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll get to it.
Oh, okay, good.
I'm not gonna show you a picture because I didn't have time to find it.
Any idea what all they did with copper?
Well, at that time, it was very popular to have copper sheeting on your roof.
Okay.
All your flashing, instead of aluminum, it was all copper, your gutters, everything. It was,
Your Statue of Liberty?
well, that's cast, but stuff like roofing and flashing and gutters were all rolled copper.
So wooden pans and wooden wires.
Let's see if I can find where I was. Well, anyway, back on the art. Since they were neighbors, I'm sure that Mr. Freer kind of got Hecker interested in some of these guys. He was a patron of various artists, including a fellow named James Whistler. And you've always all seen the painting Whistler's Mother. His neighbor was the patron saint to that guy. And some of Whistler's artwork ended up in the Tannenheim mansion out there on Highway 4. Or is it 4A?
4A.
Yeah. Okay. So, I didn't get any of that, but I did get some of the work.
So they had one of Whistler's cap?
Mhm.
They had a portrait of Whistler's cap.
No hecklers. Anyway, his son, and we'll talk about this later, Hecker's son, Frank Clarence Hecker, moved out to this mansion. The story is that he had this little house first, but his wife was not going to come out in the piney woods and live in a hovel. She apparently was fairly well spoiled by this time. So they had to build the big house. And I think you probably look down on it a little bit, but it's a nice house if you haven't been in there. And it was well equipped with artwork. A little more on that in a minute. Now, he had a nice house that he built there on Woodward Avenue. There's a view of it from an old postcard. If you built a nice house, people would make a postcard and send it around. There's another view. After his death, that became a music store, and then today it is very nicely restored, and it's a law office. Now, I do have a few views of what it was like back in the day, so you can see how the other half lived. Now, on the front porch, if you looked up before you went in the front door, you've got some tile work that costs more than my house, just under the front porch. I love that door. That's got to be into his den. You see the swords and the canteen above the doorway. But the ovals are not just solid ovals. Those are carved into fan shapes. And all this wonderful woodwork in there that I don't think that people could quite get into that today with the cost of manual labor being what it is. Those turrets that you saw on the corners of the building were bedrooms, and here's one of them.
So multi-room bedrooms too.
Well, we got more than one bedroom. Yeah, well, it's more like suites. You have to have a dressing room and that sort of stuff. Eventually, Colonel Hecker became a congressman. So one more hat that he wore. Also, you'll find that, I believe it was President Roosevelt appointed him to be on the commission for the Panama Canal. So he was very well known. Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt. Now this picture right here, I think explains some minor mysteries. Years ago, I saw the title search papers for the Tannenheim place, and there was a Herman G. Hecker named on there, which makes me think maybe Herman was meant to live there instead of Clarence. But anyway, this Major Hecker was his son, was the old man's son, and the younger fella is a grandson. I suspect that was Clarence's son, because in the attic of Tannenheim, I found that hat. Somebody let me run a buck one day. Now, you know you're rich and famous if people name ships after you. He didn't even have to buy the ship. Gilchrist Transportation Company named this ship after him. I think that's about 464 feet long. Frank J. Hecker. There it is in the water. That was reconfigured several times, but it operated from 1905 to 1961. They were towing it to be scrapped when it sank. So whoever decided it's time to scrap that boat had their timing perfect.
So what all did they do with it? What did it carry?
I don't know what the initial purpose was. Later, when automobiles became fashionable, it was an auto hauler. They may have hauled, well, it could have been anything. On the Great Lakes, they hauled ore, they hauled timber, all sorts of stuff.
So it ran into the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah. Now that's Mama Hecker there. That's Frank's wife. And the colonel died in 1927.
What did he do for Al?
Partner.
They were partners in all kinds of stuff.
That was my next question. I didn't hear how Alger got, this name got Alger. I heard about Sullivan. How did he get?
Where were you?
With this? I had to go
They
outside.
used his money.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, Alger
I know they got
was a big
together, you know.
businessman in Michigan, and Sullivan was a businessman here in Pensacola,
Right.
and they had all this land they hadn't really tapped into up in Escambia and Conecuh counties, so they got together, got the railroads, hauled the freight.
Neil, another question on him. I didn't catch if you said anything about his services in police.
Oh, yes, well see, it's in here, but I can't see.
I got the same problem today.
He can read it later.
He was for a while the Detroit Police Commissioner.
So he didn't live here?
No, he never lived here. His son Clarence lived in Tannenheim as the caretaker over the business interests here. Clarence also had down at Bluff Springs a veneer mill, the Escambia Veneer Company,
Then why did we name Hacker Road after
because Clarence Hecker was there.
Because he had money.
him? He was a caretaker?
And a lot of it.
Okay.
Well, at the end of Hecker Road was Hecker's house.
Thank you. I'll buy that.
One other point there, that
She must go down.
in that day and time, if with people of wealth who had a son and didn't quite know what to do with him, because he didn't have that as
They saved a Bluff
so
Springs.
you sent him off and set him up in business.
Yeah, there were rumors about stuff like that. Now, most of his activities involved hunting and going down to the Pensacola Yacht Club for partying and sailing. So, but it's a nice gig if you could get it.
Now, if you know where Hecker's, the mansion is up there, Little Hecker is still out there where Miss Street lived. That was known as Little Hecker.
I think that was the initial house. That
Yeah,
they set
that
up
was the
just
initial,
to-
yeah.
And the missus objected to that bubble.
Is that Ozzie Street?
Uh-huh.
Her house was used to be.
The Little Hecker. There used to be a road that went through back to the big house.
Now, the next name to look forward to is Edward A. House. Now, we talked about him a lot. Mr. House was the boss. So that the town owned the land, the town owned the houses, the town owned the utility, and, or no, the company ran all these, and he ran the company, so he was the boss. If your grass got tall, he told you to mow it, and you better mow it. The story is told that when they put electricity in, it was not with switches on the wall and things like that. They had a drop cord, and when we got this building, you could still see some of the drop cords in the house. Well, that was not wired for lots of other stuff, but people had these adapters, you don't see them much anymore. You would screw them into the light socket, and then you could plug your electric iron into it. Well, you better not get caught. So Mr. Toby used to tell us about his mother doing her ironing with the shades drawn, so she wouldn't get caught. Mr. House, as a boy, he did not come from a wealthy family, but they were in pretty good shape, as you can see. He looks a little timid.
Well, what he had done wrong that they did that?
That may be embarrassment. He looks a little timid, but that may be embarrassment from this outfit that he's having to wear. As a younger man, or as an older fellow, a young man, adult, he went to work for his uncle, who happened to be Colonel Hecker. And he worked at the Peninsular Car Company. Now, I think I may have glossed over and missed Hecker's operation with the Peninsular Car Company. They made railroad cars. You have to check, they may have made our boxcar. They could churn out 100 boxcars in a day.
The wheels were from the American Foundry, which was one of the other.
But anyway, he worked as a purchase agent, basically, for his uncle at that company. And when they started the Alger-Sullivan, they said, well, the boy's proven to be a responsible sort of fellow, got a good head on his shoulders. Let's send him down to Foshee and see if he can survive that. The initial mill was at Foshee, Alabama, until the mill here was built. And Foshee operation continued until about 1922. They had a fire and they rebuilt, and just things were winding down, and the mill here kept getting more and more capacity. So they just shut that one down and left it. There he is in his later years. He was the boss of the company from the start in 1901 to the end in 1957. 1957, they sold out, broke the place up, and the local mill became the Alger-Sullivan Sawmill Company, so it's a different company. Joe McNeil and Baby Dozier used to talk about your company. No, it's your company that did that. Talking about the separate companies. By the way, that first picture of him, I forgot to mention where we got that. When Mr. House died, it was in his will that the house, which was right over here, where the post office is, be torn down because he knew nobody would take care of it. He said, I want everything torn down, everything thrown away. Well, Marion Leach, who used to live here, and that's why we call this the Leach House, not because we have critters. He said, no, that's just wrong. So he grabbed some stuff, including a bunch of pictures, and a great big picture that you'll see on the wall somewhere was under a rug. And after his mother died, Dan Leach found it and gave the picture to us. You see, Mr. House had a pretty good house here, always nicely kept. His daughter was married in the garden right out here. Now, when we acquired this property, we didn't know that fountain was there. We didn't know that trellis work was there. It was that grown up. We didn't know there was a garage in the backyard here. Had no idea. It was just that big a mess when we got it. So they had a comfortable life. Here, see, that's the one that we found under the carpet. So a lot of people are happy if they get 20 or 30 years in on the job. He had a little longer than His house that was torn down is now in J, and a good many things were destroyed. But thanks to Marion Leach, we have this picture and a few other things. Now, I've saved the best for last. Of the characters, my favorite is Colonel William Dalton Mann. Interesting character. And the name of his biography kind of says it all.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
We've been out of those for a while. This was published back in the 60s. And every now and then I can find a couple of new copies, and I've got 2 on order now to replenish our supply. If you ever get a chance to latch onto this, do so. If you can't buy one, borrow one. I couldn't find mine. And Mom couldn't find hers, so
So you steal.
they just disappear. Yeah, that would be appropriate. Well, now what do we know about William Mann? For years, well, when we first started up this operation with the Historical Society, we saw the corporation papers, you know, Russell Alger and Martin Sullivan and Colonel Mann and these others. Who are these guys? And did he really look like that? Well, pretty close. Now, Colonel Mann went into the Army kind of the way my great-great-grandfather did. Back during the war, if you got up a bunch of guys to form a unit, then you got to be captain. So he got a bunch of guys and went down to the local draft board and said, I got me a unit. And he said, okay, captain. He later, and that's what Thomas Jefferson Neal, my great-great-grandfather, did. He was cavalry captain in Georgia. So he soon switched over to the cavalry. And in time, if you didn't get killed and you had some aptitude, you advanced pretty quickly during that war.
Because of those who did get killed.
That's exactly right. Now, he became a colonel in the cavalry. But people were shooting at him. And he saw opportunity because the equipment was no good. The equipment that had been on these guys, on these soldiers, had been the same stuff been there for 50 years. You had a knapsack that just kind of slung under your shoulder, you know, around your shoulder and dug in and made you walk humped over. You had a hog leg pistol on one hip that made you walk this way, and you had a sword over here, and it was just a big mess. Well, he saw an opportunity to do something bigger and better. And here he is as a soldier. He was still doing that whisker thing. Here's some of the equipment he can. There's actually a book that he wrote on military equipment. And this is his improved gear. I don't know if you know anything about military web gear today. They've got something called an ASHS rig. And I forget what the acronym is, but basically it's a load supporting harness that you wear. And that's what this is. It distributes the weight of the backpack, the cartridge box on the front, the sword, and the pistol, so that the soldiers can run longer with greater comfort and endurance. Another thing that he changed, you notice the larger cartridge box there on the front. You didn't want your cartridge box too deep because you had to be able to get it. Now, we're not talking about brass cartridges. We're talking about rolled up chunks of paper with gunpowder lead in it. You had to be able to dip down in there and get them out. So what he did is he had a layer of 20 cartridges, and then when those were used up, you reach your finger down there and pull on something, and like a little elevator, it brought up another 20 cartridges. So he was the inventor of the high-capacity magazine, which is so popular today. Also, he claimed that because this thing was larger and because it's heavy leather and metal, that you had a 20% reduction in mortality should you get hit in that general vicinity. I personally would not try it out, but it sounds like a good story.
If they shoot you in the gunpowder, you're more likely to survive.
Well, you get cauterized immediately. Let's see. By the way, that photograph of him that I showed a moment ago with his whiskers and all this, we've never had a photograph of Colonel Mann to put on the wall. I have one coming. So we'll put Jerry to work framing the thing. Here's another look at this web here from the back. You see it's crossed over in the back and the belt is attached. And so he was an inventor. Actually, before the war, he was trained, I believe, as a civil engineer. So he had some substance behind this. But anyway, he made a potload of money after he quit the Army to sell equipment to them. He later went into the railroad car business. You've heard of the Pullman car, where you could, have yourself a little luxury and a place to sleep and a little box to chill out in, your own personal compartment. He invented this concept, or was a co-inventor of the concept. He established this car company, and for a few years spent time all over the United States and all over Europe promoting this thing. And at one time, his company was the biggest thing going in Europe. Eventually, this and some of the competition were bought up by Pullman, and he got rich again. Now, I say again, the man had a tendency to spend money. So he never
Stay rich.
He never had a lot of money, but he made a lot. Now, one of the things he got into, I'm getting ahead of my notes here, so I better catch up just a moment. Another thing he got into was the con man business. Remember the story of Edwin Drake, I believe it was, who discovered how to drill for oil? Well, he decided he was going to get in the oil business, and he sold a good many oil wells. There wasn't necessarily any oil in them, but he got in the business of selling oil wells. So that's one of his enterprises. Then he also discovered the power of the printed word. That made him a publisher. Right after the war, he came down to Mobile and took over what we now know as the Mobile Press Register. And he discovered he could kind of slant things to his own purposes, but
They never do that.
but he really discovered the power of the printed word when he got back to New York. Had a newspaper scandal sheet called Calvin Topics. And if you gave him money, he would say nice things about you. And if he had some dirt on you and you didn't give him money, woe be unto you. He would not hesitate to skewer you. As an example, he made comments about President Roosevelt's daughter, something to the effect that she didn't wear enough clothes and she hung out with married men and she was imbibing in cocaine, and the thing was true, but embarrassing nonetheless.
So publisher and extortion should go together.
Yeah, it's a great combination, and he said, well, now this is working out great. Now, he had ways of getting up his dirt. He had a team of guys who would go out and talk to people. They'd listen in bars, they'd listen in hotels, they slip a few bucks to the health at some of these mansions in the society homes, and they would talk to the society people too. If someone had just paid their tribute and was on the good list, they might know something bad about their neighbor. And if they were having a feud, they might pass this information along. So in addition to this little operation, he decided he was going to write a book. You've seen these who's who books where you get to write your own thing. Well, this went on for years and years and years. And this book never quite got published. Well, finally, somebody called him on it, and he got sued. Well, eventually, he showed up in court with the book. There was only one copy, but it was gorgeous. It was hand-tooled leather with gold inlays and all this sort of stuff. And sure enough, the who's who of society was in there, and many names were mentioned, and some stories were told that were flowery and some not so flowery. So he was constantly getting into trouble with the law, and I believe he got into a suit. Emily Post's husband, I believe she was an etiquette columnist. Well, apparently he had kind of broken etiquette and had himself a lady friend. And they came to him and said, you need to pay us $1,500. He was broke at the time. Some of these big money men, like the colonel, managed to lose money as fast as they gain it. So he decided, I'm going to go confess to my wife. And she knew. So she gave him advice, and they set up an entrapment. But somehow or another, the colonel escaped, and they got away with that. But you can't help but wonder how this rogue got his stock in the Alger-Sullivan lumber company.
What did he know on whom?
We know that he was well aware of General Alger from the wartime. But I kind of feel like that there was something that he knew. Well, we do know there had been the scandal with the general in the Spanish-American War, and he didn't need any more. In fact, the general wrote a book on the Spanish-American War to kind of justify himself. We've got a copy of it in our library, by the way. So I'm thinking that that is how Colonel William D. Mann came to be a part of the Alger-Sullivan Lumber Company. Now, you've seen the cartoons of him. You've seen his person there. He smoked cigars by the tobacco field. He always wore nice clothes. He had houses all over the place. He threw fantastic parties. He kept his men who dug up the scandal in plenty of money and plenty of booze. He was just, he had his own table at Delmonico's. Now you see he's a pretty big guy. I think he was something like 6'4", 6'5". And so he's just all around bigger than life. And he was the man who robbed the robber barons.
They said when he walked down the street, it was like a train. He was so huge, and he puffed and he snorted, and then he came down the street in New York, and people moved to get out of his way.
So that's Colonel Mann, who died in 1920, I believe it was of complications from the flu.
All right, you had him in Mobile. Any closer to this area?
Oh, he came to board meetings and such, but he was all.
He didn't live around here, did he?
No, he didn't. He didn't live. He lived in Mobile for a few years, and then he went back to New York, where it was a little more lucrative. And that's the end of my story tonight.
Get a copy of that book for us, would you? Or get that copy of that book.
Which book?
The one that only has one copy.
Oh, that. Good luck.
If you didn't learn anything else from his talk, it taught me, don't ever sit in these hard chairs.
It wasn't that long.
No, really, you did a great job. You really did. It's good. We
Except for that one picture.
Yeah, that one picture of Robert Redford. That's good.
It was the legs.
Yeah. It was really, that was great. When we're making calls, you can use this.
Don't forget all this money.
Okay, it's refreshment time.
Got that up for you.
Jewel, where are you at?
I'm washing up.
Can I go through these?
Okay.
Well, you have to go out to that.
Agnes, are we ready? Okay.
I'm gonna head out.
How you doing?
You know your little teeth.
No. They already hated each other.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
I saw this chance receipt. Yes, she did.
Are we ready, Margaret?
Don, I do what I do.
Morning. Yeah, well, we'll let you do the next program.
It smells like hair burning. It's real. It smells like all you gotta do is tie your little knot in there and push your wire over and put the wheel down.
Oh, pretty bad. Down. Oh, up and down.
Move that out of your way.
Patsy, do you know if y'all got working nights?
That's one of yours. No, Miss Collier gave that. Her son, she lived out Texas and Mexico. I jumped on that when I was running the bulls. I spent a short time in the Army years ago. And anyway, me and one boy he was at Oklahoma. He had told me, rodeo man, I didn't really pay no attention. One day he was down in town in a ballroom, and he wanted somebody else, and they got to talking. They were pulling their shirts off and showing their claws. They called How you doing these days?
You have to
Yeah, they agitate him. They get him all straight and stop.
Yeah, you do.
No, don't do that. That's the rule. And all you have to do is let her come to your step. You don't do that.
I'm gonna try to go one. There you go. Oh, give me help.
There you go.
You know the Rosses don't have red hair.
My goodness, I thought you were gonna die.
That's a 12-ounce, you know, that cottage cheese, cool well, butter, and different kind of stuff. It's gotta be that, something about that mix.
Yeah, what I'm saying. Sometimes we just look after. People get out of
Every day but the 25th is that
Mama said if you had it on the right, no place to hang it. Everything they made it the old pretty soon they get your service.
Have a problem.
Got it where you be spending more. Or spending more at the company store than you think.
But anyway, that's your mark. Senator Davis noticed, she said she was.
It's easier to get it than it is to do.
Your husband said, no.
Game party. What we gonna do?
Did you?
I will.
Get out. I did.
Good to see you.
We got wild hogs up there.
I was understanding we could put
I didn't get a shot at it. And then we got
I just went ahead and bought it.
You bought one.
Yeah, I was
You don't, that's what I'm trying to do. Keep you from doing. But, you know, I'm gonna ask them. Well, but I do, but, of course, it's gonna drive. You know, that's not really a.
Yeah, find out.
I will. I'm gonna try to go Saturday. I expired, so I'm gonna try to go Saturday.
Day are they gonna have the 10th or?
10th, that'll be,
Far away.
3 weeks from this Saturday.
You gonna get a what?
Yeah, this ain't gonna be as big as this barbecue, that's the salt. We're just gonna do serve it. Yeah. That's what you told me. You know what? That's right. I can see it. I can see it.
And then ours is before months.
You can't deny that, can you?
Boy, I had some red snapper this morning, today.
Oh, yeah. Somebody called him out.
Yeah, boy, he called me. Wouldn't be too fish for
Oh,
free.
yeah?
But you know, you can't,
over here,
hey,
get out of the
free.
way.
You know, if you can't smell it, you know, like you smell it. You feel all this mud.
This way I can keep an eye on everybody. That's okay.
These mud, there's a day you can't, banks are like,
I wonder if that's what Jerry, what Jerry's
Put
going
red
out
snapper,
for
and then
me.
freeze it for 5 or 6 months and still be good.
You like to come along and make sure.
It's hard to beat that red snapper and good. I didn't like it on trip. I'd rather have it than a snapper. And a lot of people used to consider it a trash fish.
and you take that.
Yeah.
You know, the mullet is high, and then, you know, a croaker high.
Yeah, yeah.
But I leave them in.
I seen something on TV last night. You've seen it all on TV, that gets all that crazy food goes on foreign countries. We went to Savannah, Georgia. And there's a family up there that made their living for the last 200 years on shrimping and crabbing. Well, the prices for the gas and everything was going up faster than the price of seafood. They started making some octopus traps. Going out catching octopus and selling them octopus. Apparently they're getting pretty good price in the octopus. And they took pieces of like 4-inch sewer pipe, plastic sewer pipe, hold it, and they put cement on the bottom, so it would be heavy and float down. And they just let them sink them with a buoy on, and they go out there and pick them up. They said when the season's right, 8 out of 10, they'll do the baskets will have it locked. It's in Vietnam. Come over here. Eat that bush, river fish.
See, they were really bad.
Oh, yeah. I went out there years ago. I caught a 55-pound cruise. I brought it home. I laid him out. I knew about it. Take him jaws. And the jaws was like a batty chicken breast. Anyway, I got to mess around with his jaw. I got a piece of meat that big. It's involved, y'all
In more ways than one.
But it was too late then.
It's kind of like, it's kind of like meat. You know, you got white meat and dark meat. That dark meat tastes a little different. The roads and jaws, they got a little bit stronger taste than the fillets do.
You got a lot of ways
That's what he did.
They check your blood pressure and all that.
Stove ain't been fired up since day. Well, I go down to the hard and eat breakfast, and I'll eat down, if I got money, thing, I'll go down to the big house.
Okay, yeah.
I said, they know they can cook. You got some to be shared with them, feed up in the hall. It smells good in there now. All that
I ain't gonna, I want to be gone before she died. $500 light bill and $1,500 grocery bill.
was that here?
No, I'm not getting there.
I'll move around.
Y'all can both sit over here.
Got my job, huh?
Y'all go ahead and sit down there. So, where'd you guys train at? Over close to you?
Broken house in the field up there.
That's good because he's got his independence. He broke away. Who's living there beside her mother?
Her daughter.
She kind of was
Downstream from the sawmill. And he was talking about the lynchings.
at least getting that cooking and cooking going. Do you care?
She said the house is falling down.
At least for
Don't you want to be big and pretty like me and son?
yeah, well, I do. when I grow up, but
Yeah.
I don't want to grow up.
A bunch of wooden barges. South of Florida, they would be the pipe on the river. All wood, upside down. Too far from where the river across. Somebody told me not too long ago, that during World War II, somebody had an operation. Yeah, Cotton Creek. That's got 5 years.
It's too late, these.
That's all the airspace.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe I can handle that. But, I do need to go somewhere. Yeah, so.
Well, you just want to get one right on the side of the road. You know that?
Oh, yeah.
It would be out sort of
Contributing.
right along the side of the road. There's 2 stores right
I hope you're not offended.
There was a school. They call it bowling bee. Your mother might have heard of it before any of our fans. I've never been able to get through any pictures.
Shoot, I can't even.
I think that's
I've got a picture of
You can't be that every
Yeah. He had his own way of his dad.
All right, how are you?
You gonna get him big? Yeah.
They just go wild, you know, they go wild and around.
Mr. and Miss Wine. Nice to meet you.
Thank you,
It's no
You tell me or you?
Play things in the tank. I never get done.
Both of them, you know, I'm retired, but anyway.
You went with them on the trip.
Old man, had a sedan. Well, they, my mom and dad stole it. Well, I got later. Get some, I don't know what it was.
road real good. Dad's big. So that's one of Mr. Bob's. Anyway, he got behind him, got pushing him, and so I think I'm gonna go with explosion. I knew they'll call it. Be over, putting the wave out the window. Everybody shook it up in a second. He just laughing out there. Looking back, finally 3 or 4 hours later, People Chapel Church. Old man, going in there for 2 weeks. Wages wouldn't stop. He just flat him and she got married, she did all right. I saw her about 9 or 6 years ago, Church's Chicken. Yeah, she got married. Yeah. That was old man Dobbs. That was old man Dobbs, I tell you what. I can't even think, that was when, you know, that road was a dirt road. 4A was a dirt road. The state come through and they give Mr. Dobbs so much money to take that tree out. They finally talked to him and said, well, took out one big old wall. The other one, they said, well, if you just cut the limbs off of it, that'll be good enough. But they got to pay money for it, you know. Old man Dobbs got hurt. He fell out and broke his arm. He hired majors. Majors cut the limb off and broke the bone. He's I'm not allergic. Yeah, we got both of them street light and garage lights on. You got it shipping wheels and the year before that, I had that big. I still got 68. About 6 months. They had guys on the field working on the trail saw James. I was on one of the trail saws. One of them rollers. This stuff is have an extra check for a different stack. You can't hardly stack your short on the bottom. You get nothing around. You got 6 up crossways so you can stack them. And you have to shoot the middle out of the side. Anyway, when I was making that motor down there, when I first started, I'd go home lunch from the hill right down there. There's water at the lake. And when I go to lunch, somebody push on my I got a sandwich in the bag. Oh yeah, me and Gerald. You remember a guy? But we get